This short video will introduce you to a simple way to record cash expenses on any farm or ranch operation. Now, cash expenses is a typical part of a chart of accounts. In other words, it's one of the segments. Think of that loose leaf binder, and there's a tab in that binder that says cash expenses. And then inside that tab, you would record the different things that you spend money for out during the year in the farm or ranch operation. Remember, we're using a single entry accrual adjusted system. So we're not going to have debits and credits for our cash expenses. We're simply going to write those down. Look at the simple spreadsheet that is in the video and notice that it's got several different categories for types of expenses. In other words, out here on the right hand side, there's feed, fuel, chemicals, farm insurance, seed, and fertilizer. Now, on any farm or ranch operation, you know there would be many more categories than just those simple six. However, for illustration purposes, those will be enough to show you how you could set up a cash expense ledger. The information you need would vary based on how much detail you might want in the ledger for the cash expenses and how much detail you need at the end of the year. But just to illustrate typical things, we would need something for date, when we made the purchase, where we made the purchase, and then I use some simple titles here, but you would obviously, whoever the vendor might be is what you would put in this particular category. If you wrote a check for that, you would have a check number here. You could also have something for like an invoice number. There are several different ways that you could list the actual payment here. You could even have a drop-down menu that would have check, debit card, cash, and so forth. A column for units and a column for quantity, a column for price times or price per unit, okay? And then a total column out here that simply multiplies price times quantity. So for example, on this first one, we went to the co-op on January 5th. We wrote check number 101. We bought 3 tons of something, whatever that might be, at a price of $455 per ton for a total check amount of $13.65. Now, this particular purchase was for feed, so we simply take that $13.65 and put it in the feed column. And then we continue to do that for different things. For example, on the 12th, we bought fuel. Right? So we wrote check number 102. We bought gallons of fuel. We bought 500 gallons at $2.55 a gallon, $1,275, and then we put that $1,275 over here under fuel. Also, in order to keep a running total, you could go right up above feed, fuel, chemicals, and so forth, and you could put a sum statement, or in other words, you could tell Excel right here to add. Now, you'd have to tell it how far down to add, but that's not a real issue. You could simply say sum and have it sum from, say, row 7 down through row 1,000 or something, and you could just be sure you left plenty of room to put in all your different entries. Now, the beauty of that is at the end of the year, at the end of the fiscal year, when you need to put your cash operating expenses into a financial statement, there you've got the totals. You don't have to go back and total anything. They simply will have those running totals, and you can either put those into a different spreadsheet, or if you're pretty good with Excel, you could link those and have it actually put those in a form that you could directly pull them into the financial statements. I will illustrate that a little later on and show you how that would work. So let's one more time. Let's just go down and put another one in. Let's say we go to the 3rd month and the 4th day of this is a year old, so we'll use the same dates here. And let's suppose that we went to the fuel store again. Okay, if I could spell everything correctly. And we wrote check number 110. Again, we bought gallons of diesel. We bought 300 gallons of diesel. Those cost us $2.80. Okay. I've already got the formulas in, so it multiplied those together. So I'll take that 840 now, and I'll simply go over here and put it into the fuel column, and you'll notice it added that 840 to the 1275 earlier to give me a running total. I'm not going to illustrate it in this video, but if you know a little bit about Excel, another thing you can do, you can use an option Excel has called subtotals, and you could come into this spreadsheet and you could direct Excel to sum each of these categories at the end of each month. So in other words, what Excel would do, it would come in here, right here, it would add a row, and it would do this right here. It'd insert a row, and on that row it would give you the totals for each of these categories for that particular month. And you'll see later again in the course where that information could be extremely beneficial because you could carry that directly over to one of the financial statements. This is a very simple example of cash expenses. So don't be fooled. I mean, a cash expense ledger, which is part of the chart of accounts for a fairly large farm and ranch, could have you could have maybe 30, 35 columns of expense categories out here, and you might have a few hundred rows of purchases. Sometimes students ask me, they say, well, what if you went to the co-op and you wrote check number 101 and you bought some fuel, some feed, some chemicals? That's not an issue at all. You could you could do that a couple of ways. You could have sublines under this particular entry, or you could just have multiple lines for each of the items you bought and use the same check number. The other thing too is that you could set this Excel spreadsheet up, if again requiring a little bit of expertise in Excel, where you could have this column here, this what is now feed, you could put a column in here and just have a code in here, and that code could be like number 1 is feed, number 2 is fuel, number 3 is chemicals, and so forth. And you could put a code in here and then use if statements out here where whatever code you put, it would automatically go put it in the category. But again, it's so easy just to write down what you bought, how much you bought, what was the price, how much you spent, and simply go put that number in one of these categories. If you had a spreadsheet already built too, doing this on a daily basis is pretty simple and doesn't take a lot of time. Now, if you just stored your receipts on the visor of the pickup and tried to do this end of the year, it could take you an awful long time. But if you had a simple spreadsheet already set up with the formulas in and so forth, and just every time you went to a vendor and purchased something for the farm, if you simply went down here and typed it in like I showed you a moment ago, it'd be really easy to keep this, and at the end of the year you've got information for your management purposes, and you've got information for income tax purposes. Now remember, this little video illustrates cash expenses, which is one of the chart of accounts, one of the sections of the chart of accounts that we will need when we begin to create financial